Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Justin and you are watching That Christian Vlogger. And on today's episode, we are going to be talking about the subject of mental illness and Christianity. Now, truth be told, I've actually been avoiding this topic for a little while simply because I really don't believe that I am qualified to give like an informed view on this kind of thing, even though I've had my own personal experience with like depression and other things like that. It's like when I was younger, in fact, I was even like diagnosed with bipolar, ADD, ADHD, and there's like a whole host of mental illness issues that people struggle with. So it's like really hard to give advice for one particular person that can apply to like everybody and not like mislead anyone. So before I guess I kind of dive into this, I want to make it very clear that this is not at all medical like advice. I'm not a professional. I was never trained in the area of mental illnesses, and the best advice that I could possibly give you if you are someone struggling with mental illness is to actually go and speak and talk to a professional. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no like bad things if you go and talk to like a psychologist or something like that. I've actually had to talk to a counselor myself over the last year when I was struggling with depression, and it was like obviously God was the one who helped work through this person, but as far as like practical things that I did, I would say that counseling was the single most important thing to help me on the road to recovery from my personal depression. So before we start, go and see a counselor. If you're like struggling, like, oh, that's not good for Christians to do that, then find a Christian counselor or something like that, but find a trained professional and they're going to be able to help you more than I ever will be able to help. But with that said, so many of you guys have been writing in the comments. I've literally received comment after comment. I've received messages, even personal emails and like DMs on Instagram. People asking about if I could do a video talking about the subject of mental illness. And I think that the reason why so many people are really interested in hearing about that is because there's a lot of, I want to say, maybe misinformation about the subject of mental illness. A lot of times Christians and churches, I guess just in general, make it seem like if you are a person who struggles with mental illness, that it's because your faith is not strong enough or because, Jesus isn't actually in your life. A lot of times we read the verses, Jesus says, "My peace I give unto you," or the psalmist will say, "Thou keep him in perfect peace as long as his mind is stayed on him." And this is certainly the way that I've approached these verses, but I think sometimes we take it too far where we say, you know what, because I don't have peace in this exact moment in my life, and the Bible says if I keep my eyes on Jesus, or if I have the Spirit in my life, that I'll have peace, then therefore it must mean that God is actually not with me. And I get why people think like this. This is actually how I thought for a while, but I've learned that it's not so black and white. This isn't always the case. It's not as simple as, if you have Jesus in your life, everything's going to be hunky-dory and life's going to be great and it's going to be like rainbows and butterflies and sunshine every single day of the year. But the reality is that even as Christians, we can struggle with mental illnesses, we can struggle with depression, we can struggle with a whole host of things simply because of the fact that we are human. We were created, yes, in a perfect environment in Eden where there was going to be none of this like diseases, whether it's a physical disease or a mental disease. But because of the fall, because of sin, we now live in a world where this is the reality. And one thing that I want to say is that we need to stop looking at mental illness as a different type of disease than, say, like a physical disease. No one goes around saying, oh, you know what, you have asthma, right? That's because you don't have trust in God. Or, you have high cholesterol. It's because, you don't pray enough. Now, of course, I'm not saying that prayer doesn't help in these situations, and of course, I would encourage you to continue praying, but no one makes a connection with, I have a broken leg with, I don't read my Bible enough or something along those lines. And yet, for some reason, we tend to do this when it comes with mental diseases or mental illnesses, and we forget that the brain, just like the arm or just like the heart or just like our legs or whatever the case is, the brain is also an organ in this physical body. And just in the same way that like a liver can fail at times, or maybe there's a chemical imbalance in your body, the same thing can be true and I think often is the case when it comes to mental illnesses. So we need to stop looking at mental illnesses or depression or something like that as a separate category from a physical illness. If I had heart problems, there would be no problem. There would be no negative, what's the word I'm looking for? There would be no negative view of me going to a cardiologist to seek help, to get advice from this heart doctor. But why is it that when I have an issue with my brain, therefore when I go and see someone who specializes in the brain, that, all of a sudden now I'm less of a Christian? And I think that this view is actually backed up by the scriptures. I mean, think about this. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus said that the spirit is willing, but our flesh is weak. In other words, there are times in our lives where we know what's right. We even maybe have the desire to do the thing that is right. In that case, it was praying with Jesus and stuff like that. But the reality is sometimes because of our sinful flesh, it makes that very difficult to do. So even though you might know what's the best way to live your life, and to not be depressed, to be happy, to have peace, and not have anxiety in your life, even though you know that that's the good thing, sometimes your flesh makes it difficult. And yes, you can say, oh, the flesh is this sinful nature. But the reality, flesh is also just this physical body that you live in. So if I have an injured leg, or actually I'll give you a personal example. A few years ago, I tweaked my back while doing some weightlifting. So even though I wanted to compete that very next week, the spirit was willing, my flesh was unable to go up to the barbell and lift the weight that I wanted to lift, because it simply wasn't healthy for me to do so. So a lot of times we might want to do something, but our flesh, our physical body, whether that's our organs, it's our mind, or whatever the case is, a lot of times we are unable to do so. And I think that this is certainly the case when it comes to mental illnesses, when it comes to depression. It certainly was the case for me. I didn't want to be depressed. I didn't want to have this negative outlook on life. I didn't want to be unmotivated and just discouraged all the time. And even though I didn't want to, my body, my mind, something was wrong with that, and it didn't really make that job easier. And so what I've learned over time is that several, if not, I want to say many, if not all, mental illnesses oftentimes stem from a chemical imbalance in your brain. And yes, there are things that you can do to kind of make things better. There are things that you can do to kind of prevent these things, but it kind of boils down to a physical problem. And so, I don't think it's simple enough to just say, oh, just pray more. If I was running down the street and I twisted my ankle, no one would say, oh, the solution to getting your ankle fixed is to just pray about it more. Prayer certainly will help, and there are moments where God works a miracle, and he'll fix a broken ankle, or he'll heal a physical issue. God might do that, but a lot of times God allows us to work within this physical universe, this cause and effect. So if you twist your ankle, you might need to elevate it, you might need to compress it, you might need to ice it, you might need to rest it. So whatever the case is, you have some tangible things to do that can actually make it better. Now, for me, the same thing was true when it came to my depression, and I might venture to guess that the same could be true for other areas of mental illness. When I was depressed, it was very difficult for me to continue doing some of the things that I love doing, like exercise or sleep or just hanging out with friends or eating well and things like that. And it was another one of those moments where the spirit was willing, but the flesh was very, very weak. And through this accountability, I was able to kind of slowly, over time, get better. And so I don't know exactly what it is that you might be struggling with, but I want to simply just say there is no problem getting help. It's just like as if you went to a doctor, went to a physical therapist, or anything else like that. I injured my shoulder, or I got jumped and I got my shoulder dislocated, torn labrum, had surgery. There's no problem with me going to physical therapy, which I have been doing for the last couple of months. And my shoulder is slowly but surely getting stronger and getting better. The same thing can be true for your mind. So if you're struggling with mental illness or depression or something along those lines, seek help. It's not a bad thing. And in fact, a lot of times that help will actually make a big difference in your life. So what about all of these verses that do talk about, if we have God in our life, we will have more peace and things like that? I think that is definitely true still, even though I am saying that, there's this physical universe that we are living in. I still want to encourage you to strive to those types of things. But I think that these are not so much like, on and off switches, but it's more of like a goal to be shooting for. So, when Jesus says, sin not, it's not like, oh, boom, like if you have Jesus, you're never sinning. And if you start sinning, that Jesus leaves you kind of thing. It's more of a goal to be shooting for. It's a way of life. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of approaching everyday problems that will actually help you. So, Paul writes in the book of Romans, he actually says the things that I want to do, I don't end up doing, and things that I don't want to do, I end up doing. So Paul knows what it's like to struggle with the spirit being willing and the flesh is weak, but over time you get to learn how to do these things. over time and through practice, you learn how to approach problems in a way where you're not going to be so discouraged so easily, because this is, again, the mind is a muscle. In the same way that if I were to go to the gym and bench press, every couple days, every single week, my chest is going to get stronger and I'm going to be able to handle that challenge more effectively. In the same way, when you practice positive thinking, when you practice these positive habits to develop your muscle, which is your brain, you're going to be able to handle those challenges in a healthy way down the line. And that's why it's so important, every time that you're faced with a bout of depression, or every time you're faced with these different obstacles, you want to put yourself in the habit, the practice of handing those problems off to God. This is something that the Bible talks about. Yes, it's super important, but you grow in that ability to do that. You grow in that ability to trust God over time. So look at every single day, every day opportunities to put trust in God as kind of like your training in life, whether it's like you go to the gym every single day to build yourself physically. Look at challenges, obstacles, and difficulties in life as like a gym session, in the sense that you're building up your mind, you're building up your character. But look at, maybe I would say, mental illnesses or depression or something like that as, say, an injury. So, you generally speaking, you want to be trending towards health and wellness and to getting stronger, and that's the same thing with your mind. But occasionally we have setbacks. Occasionally we have injuries that come up, and in those moments, it's totally okay. The very best thing for you to do is to seek help in those moments. That's why we have these types of professionals, is to help us rebound from these terrible injuries, whether they're physical or mental injuries in our life, and to hopefully get us back on the path towards wellness and to success and happiness and joy and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully that helps. That was kind of my process. And that's why I'm such a huge advocate for counseling. I've literally spoken to so many of my friends who have been struggling with these types of things in their life, and the first thing I say is like, of course, I'm here to talk to you, and I'm here to pray for you and all these kinds of things. But the best advice I could give is to go see a professional. And if I reflect on kind of my journey, the reason why I didn't want to go see a professional was it was simply pride. I knew it was a good thing. I knew that it was a valuable thing. I knew that it would probably even work, but because of my pride, I was wrestling with, I don't want to go see it because I don't want to be weak. I don't want to be like one of those people who struggle with those kinds of things. And that was just foolishness. I just needed to simply humble myself, to be honest about where I was at that stage of my life, and to allow God to work through somebody else. And that was a difficult part of this process, is having to trust God to use someone else, whereas I couldn't just rely on myself and just fix the problem by myself. But and at the end of the day, it was what worked for me, and I wanna encourage you to check it out. But that is where I'm going to leave today's video with you guys today. I'm very interested in hearing what you have to say as far as like encouragement or advice for people who are going through a mental illness or depression or something like that. If you've gone through it before, what did you do to kind of help get out of that funk? And just basically share some encouraging words in the comment section below. I really hope that today's video was encouraging for you, that was helpful for you. Again, I'm not a doctor, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, but hopefully that will give you enough encouragement, enough of a perspective to help you in this difficult situation that you might actually be facing right now. But until next time, I'm That Christian Vlogger, and I'll encourage you to experience faith in the first person. God bless. Hey guys, if you're actually still watching all the way at the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I have a question for you guys. I've been doing these Veda videos for some time now, and if you've been watching for a while, you know that's usually when it's just me and the talking head. I have like music in the background and all that kind of stuff, which is a lot more work to do it, and all of Veda, I haven't really been putting any music into it, and I'm curious to know if that's like an important quality of these videos. Do I need to keep putting music in? Do I need to go through all that extra effort, or is this okay where it's just me talking, no music, no drama, and all that kind of stuff behind it? I'm really curious to know what your guys' thoughts are, so let me know in the comment section below. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and if you have any other questions, I do have a couple more days of Veda left, so let me know what your thoughts are.